Okay, so I think we are good to go. I don't know, Andres. Thank you.
Dice la transmisión, ya te aviso. Un momento, por favor.
Ah, ok, listo. Perfecto, gracias. Okay, so good morning. Welcome to this panel about human talent training in the organizations as part of the International Summit on Collaborative Experiences between University and Industry. Our main goal today is to identify the needs and expectations of companies regarding the training of human talent and the skills required by the productive sector, and also how does the academy respond to those requirements. My name is Kelly Garcia. I'm a teacher in the Finance and International Business program at Unipanamericana, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. We have 4 panelists, and I'll give you a brief description of their great resume before they go. We will start with Professor Dr. Joseph Duarte. Dr. Duarte holds a PhD in Pedagogy from Ramon Llull University, Barcelona, and a Master in Business Administration for ESADE Business School, Barcelona. Since 1996, is full professor in Psychology and Educational Science Department at the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. Currently, he teaches on Education and Technology file, Educational Models and Quality, and is member of the Open Evidence Research Group. As a researcher specializing in educational technology, e-learning models, and educational organization, he leads the collaborates on research projects in areas such as educational policy, higher education, leadership, and ICT use. He is the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Educational Technology in Higher Education. Dr. Duarte has been involved in several research and collaboration projects with European and Latin American universities and education quality assurance strategies consultancies with Latin American governments. Welcome, Dr. Duarte.
Thank you.
You can share your presentation and we will start with you.
Okay, can you see my presentation here now? Yes? Yes, it's okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. It's a pleasure to me to be here today with you. It will be a real pleasure if I can travel to Colombia, because Colombia is it's a place that I like so much, and I have the opportunity to visit so many times because I have good friends there, and also I'm collaborating with different universities in Colombia. And thank you very much, of course, to Compensar and Unipanamericana University to invite me to this panel. Very interesting one. And let me start saying, as you know, as a person who came from educational, have an educational background, my approach to this today's topic will be from higher education point of view, from the higher education system. The idea is to share with you today just for reflections. The first one is related to the competences, because I think and I believe that the competences is the best educational approach to collaborate with industry and the labor market. And also, because my background and my research, let me also share with you some ideas about digital competences, which I think is very important for this knowledge society, informational society in 21st century. And later I'll move on to showing some results in our university, because it's an e-learning university, online university, and what happens with our students when they access to the labor market. And to finalize the presentation, just future trends in this field. Let me start with the first point, competences. As I said, to me is a very important educational approach in order to have this relation with companies and industries. And of course, also like me, which is one of the you can see here, you can read here, one of the definitions of the competence. But to me, the most important thing is this, not the ability to successfully meet complex demands in a particular context. That could be, or seems sometimes easy, but I'm sure that it's very complicated to translate your knowledge to be applied in a particular context, sometimes complicated context that happens in the real life in the productive sector. That means the universities or higher education institutions have to must prepare people to be competent in this society. And what are more or less the most important competences in the knowledge society today? These 6 to me are the very important ones. Of course, everything related to the communication, but communication in different, not only in language. Of course, they have competences to have the opportunity to communicate in different languages, but also in different contexts, with different contexts. For instance, visual and also technological, etc. Any kind of communication skills are very important in this society. Of course, everything related to the science and technology, in particular mathematics, because data literacy is one of the most important issues nowadays. Also, digital literacy, as I mentioned before. Self-regulation, that means it's the competence to continuous learning, the learning to learn continuously in a lifelong learning system. And of course, to have the capacity to be entrepreneur, to have the sense of initiative to create new opportunities, new companies or new projects, new innovative projects, and of course to have this global approach to the reality. The globalization is of course the most important thing now in the world. And the competences at the end, the result of the competences is the learning outcomes. I mean, it's something that the students at the universities can show and can offer to the society. That means the knowledge is not the most important thing. At the end, it's something that you can show, something that you can show to the industry or the people that at the end you will work in these areas. It's a way to demonstrate your skills, your knowledge in the labor market. Of course, let me move to this point of digital competences. I really recommend this book from this president of these American universities, Robert Prof. Say the knowledge alone is not sufficient for the work of tomorrow. I think it's the work for today. And the people have to build on the all literacies these 3 new ones: data, technological, and also human. Because at the end, the humanity is the way that we have to see the world. And we have to maintain this human approach in order to be capable to dialogue also with machines. No? And I think it's important also to have this capability to maintain the relation with the other humans, of course, using technology. Let me share also this European approach to the digital competences. This is something built by European Commission and is well known here in Europe in this way that the universities approach to the world of digital competences. At the end, it's 5 areas: information and data literacy, communication and collaboration, digital content creation, and also safety and problem solving. Each area have a different information inside. For instance, here, these competences is related to the searching, filtering data, evaluating data. That means choosing the correct data for the context that you need to be implemented. No? For instance, also communication and collaboration that I mentioned before. For instance, etiquette is also important, the way that you communicate or managing your digital identity. It's something that it's very important also for a labor market. Digital content creation, and that means the capability to create content and put this content on the network, put this content in internet in order to be to facilitate the access to the other people and also to share this information with other people and build together and transform and reuse this information. And also everything related to programming, for instance. This is something that here in Europe is starting to teach also in primary and secondary school to program easy applications. Safety is one of the most important competences, digital competences, basically to protect yourself and also to protect the others in order to have, and also related to ethical issues, to protect data and your privacy. And of course, to know the way to use this information. And everything related to problem solving, not solve technical problems, identify needs, technological responses, etc. Be creative, and also identify digital competences gaps. Of course, these things are very important if from the universities we teach our programs, we manage our programs, not only focus on knowledge that we use in the past, but we change our approach and approaching to the knowledge using and preparing students in competences, that mean in skills, and offering them the opportunity to finish their studies with some learning outcomes that they can show to the labor market. For instance, in our university, which is a totally online university, started 25 years ago, and we have now more than 70,000 students working with us. We pass a survey to our students and asking, for instance, if they feel and have proof that they are improving digital competencies during the period that they are studying with us. And this is, you can see here the results. 61% say feel improvement in browsing, searching, filtering data, and also planning tasks, virtual tasks, solving technical problems, working in teamwork, that is very important also, sharing digital content, and creating and sharing digital contents too. As you can see, the most important thing is sharing, planning tasks, and also working in virtual teams, but sometimes the technical issues or technical things is something that we need also to improve a little bit. No? But also, not only focusing technical things, also citizenship competences are very important too in this knowledge society. And our students, for instance, believe and also have these feelings that they have a better teamwork acceptation when they were working about teamwork is a teamwork in virtual environments, and also better engagement to social topics, and also better engagement to civic and social responsibilities. I think this is very important too, because some people say that in virtual environments, the people it's not human or don't have social and human capabilities and competences. We can prove that our students feel also in a different ways, because it's a different context, like in another or the traditional higher education systems. And also we ask to employers, the people that employ our students, our graduates, and which are the most interesting thing for these people, which are the most important competences or values from our graduates. They have the capability, and the companies appreciate that, the capability to searching skills. Also everything related to the self-regulation, because our students are adult people who have the managed time to follow and to achieve their goals studying with us. And also the capability to work in a virtual teams. That means they have the capability to work with different teams, staying in different areas in the world, with different languages, etc. And this is also very appreciated in the labor market. And just to finish my short presentation, let me share some ideas that we are working here also in Europe related to this relation between higher education and productive sector, and also related to the competences in digital competences in knowledge society. Everything related to the prior learning recognition, that means from the higher education institutions, we have to, in particular, during the lifelong learning courses, that means in continuous education and also in master's degrees, etc., we have to recognize, we have to establish systems to recognize the prior learning from the students. I mean, their capabilities, the skills, the backpack the students have, and we need to have systems to recognize this and to put this in the context as a credit and pass this to European credits in order to be recognized from the institutions. Of course, lifelong learning, everything related to lifelong learning, continuous education, base our courses in competences, not only in knowledge. And this is also very important, micro-credentials. That means it's offering to, in particular for a continuous education, credentials, not only these degrees, master degrees or undergraduate courses, etc., just micro-credentials to maintain the people competence in a constant change society. And this is something that we can do together between institutions, higher education institutions, and also companies. And of course, personalized learning and artificial intelligence. Because this is something, I think in knowledge society, it's impossible to work in education without taking account personalized learning. And of course, in this period, we need to think about artificial intelligence, of course. Thank you very much. And this is all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duarte. For all the participants in YouTube, if you have any questions, please write it on the chat and I'll read it to the panelists. Our next panelist is Joana Ramos. She is a research fellow at Colombia's Private Council of Competitiveness, CPC. Before joining CPC in October 2018, she worked as research fellow at the Center for International Development at Harvard University, conducting economic and statistical research on education, labor market, and migration, and their links to productivity and economic growth. She also worked as a research fellow at the Inter-American Development Bank, the National Planning Department of Colombia, and as a consultant at the World Bank Group. Joana holds a BS in economics and an MS in economics from the National University of Colombia, and a master in public administration in international development from the Harvard Kennedy School. Her research interests include human capital and labor market and their effects on competitiveness. She is passionate about using data techniques to formulate policy recommendations to contribute to these areas. Welcome, Joana.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very glad and honored to take part of this important and relevant panel. I'm uploading my presentation, so it's going to take a little bit of time, and we'll start after that. Okay, I think you can see it now. So before entering into the topic of the presentation, I would like to start by introducing the Colombian Private Council of Competitiveness, what we do, what is our purpose, and what kind of work we do to improve the living conditions of the population in Colombia. So the Colombian Private Council for Competitiveness is a non-profit organization whose purpose is to promote strategies that enhance productivity growth and competitiveness in Colombia. It was founded back in 2006 by a group of businessmen and universities with the goal of having an institutions that works as a convener and interlocutor between the public sector, the private sector, the academia, and other stakeholders that are interested in promoting competitiveness and productivity in the country. So what we do specifically is to elaborate diagnosis on different sectors that are related to productivity, such as education, labor market, the tax system, the health system, corruption, and many others, very much mirroring the approach to competitiveness that the World Economic Forum has, and with the goal of provide public policy recommendations based on evidence that we think may work to improve the performance in each of these sectors, and as a whole the productivity of the country, because we believe that productivity is a multi-dimension area that is not only concentrated in what the firms do, but also in the conditions that enable the country to advance and to the people to accumulate wealth and improve their well-being. So this is a little introduction about that. So this is the agenda for the presentation. I'm going to start by establishing why productivity matters to us and why productivity is the focus of the work what we do and what we care about productivity in terms of their link of with human capital, which is actually the second part of the presentation, the link between productivity, competitiveness, and human capital at the aggregated level and but also at the firm level. Then we're gonna have like a very brief state of the art of human capital accumulation in Colombia, the trends that we observed before the COVID-19 pandemic hit the country and the global economy, and the new perspective that we have based on what we are observing of relative to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in the labor market and educational trends. Then we're gonna, I'm gonna introduce very briefly some of the recommendations that we have provided to the public sector and the private sector as actions that we consider may help them to close the human capital gaps in Colombia. And I'm gonna close with the main takeaways of the presentation. So let's start. So why productivity matters? So as we can see in the graphs, or as it's depicted in the graphs, there is a high positive and a strong correlation between productivity measured as the score that countries get in the global competitive index of the World Economic Forum, and indicators such as income, per capita income, the index of equality of opportunities that is also built by the World Economic Forum, and satisfaction, life satisfaction. So as you can see, the countries with higher levels of competitiveness, according to the measure of the World Economic Forum, are more likely to have higher levels of income, per capita income, life satisfaction, and equal opportunities. And all of this, of course, translates in higher levels of welfare, economic welfare, and social welfare. So that's why we care about productivity. Colombia has had a recent improvement in terms of competitiveness in the global competitive index published by the World Economic Forum. In 2009, we were able to improve by 3 positions in the rank, and now we are ranked 77th out of 141 economies that take part or are measured by the index. That is positive in terms of trends, but also represents a challenge for the country because there is still a large distance between the competitiveness frontier, or what is considered best practices in terms of all the areas that the index considers, such as education, institutions, the flexibility and the functioning of the labor market, and so on, and what is the current stage of affairs in the country. However, Colombia, in terms of or relative to the region, has had a very stable and dynamic economic outlook. As we can see in the graph, we are the country with the second highest growth rate among the Latin American countries, and that's due to the implementation of good public policies that have allowed the country to have a macroeconomic, a very stable and sound macroeconomic outlook. Also, we have experienced a very important and significant reduction in poverty, a reduction in inequality, an improvement in the income levels of the population, but also we keep facing the challenge of improving productivity in the country. And this is shown. This is another example of how stable the country is. And unlike the average of Latin America, we only have had 1 year of negative economic growth since 1980, while the Latin American average is 6 years. So I was saying before that the country faces the challenge of productivity, and this is shown here in the graph, in which you can see that the total factor productivity, which is the way economies measure productivity, aggregated productivity, the average growth in the last 20 years has been negative, while in cases such as Peru, it's been positive. So we sort of make a little an easy simulation that if we had the level of productivity or the growth the same dynamic that the productivity has had in Peru, for example, we would have had average economic growth of 5.2% instead of the 3.8% that we experienced over the past 20 years. So, having established why productivity matters, it is important to establish why or how human capital accumulation is connected to both productivity and competitiveness. And this is actually the subject of this very important panel. So we focus our analysis in this very user-friendly framework that explains the relationship between productivity and the efforts that the context in which the firms produce do what they do, and the efforts they do to improve their levels of efficiency. So as you can see, the productivity of the country, which is the addition or the sum of the productivity of both people and firms, is determined by the ability of the economy to allow reallocation of inputs between more productive firms or less productive firms to more productive firms, but also by the efforts that the firms do internally to improve their efficiency. And there are many examples of this, such as investment in new inputs or new technologies, or investment in training their staff, or improving their managerial practices. And the last factor determining productivity for a firm is selection, or as I was saying, the capacity of the market to allow those firms with high productivity to remain and those with low productivity to exit the market. So as you can see, human capital and management skills play a huge role in both the efforts that firms do within them and in terms of selection of how you can stay or remain or exit the market due to your levels of productivity. That's why we've heard so much about human capital and management skills and innovation. So in Colombia specifically, we conducted a joint effort of measure with the Universidad de los Andes how much of these factors weight in explaining productivity of firms in the manufacturing sector, and we found that 65% of the firm's productivity is due to internal improvements. That means all as I said before, all the efforts that firms do to improve their productivity, such as investments or improvements in their human capital management practices, training human capital, acquiring and accumulating technologies or other inputs that allow them to be more productive. And only 35% is due to the conditions in which they perform their activities or their context. So that's why we is very important for a firm to be able to be more productive and therefore to be able to export and insert itself in the global chain, in the global production chains, to make efforts in that area, in accumulating and improving the skills and the level of efficiency of their human capital or staff. So we also like to provide evidence in the sense of why there is this link and why human capital and the way it is managed within a firm is important for firm productivity and profitability. So first, McKinsey conducted a study in 2017 showing that workers in high complexity occupations such as those related to engineering or managing staff or having constant interactions with technology are on average 8 times more productive than the average working within a firm. We also find evidence that employee well-being measured as the report of how satisfied work reports being at a certain workplace. So employee well-being is strongly and positively correlated with higher levels of labor productivity, business profitability, staff turnover, and customer loyalty. And last but not least, this is very important for firms in terms of their recruitment and retention practices of staff. Companies with greater levels of gender and ethnic diversity worldwide have a 21% and a 27% higher chances of having a higher value added and a higher profits. So I'm going to go faster because I'm running out of time. So this is a little bit of a very short outlook of what is going on in terms of the trends we observed before the pandemic hit in terms of human capital accumulation in Colombia. So as you can see in the graph in the left, in the last 10 years, we were able to increase the enrollment rate in higher education from 34% to 52%. This is a huge improvement in terms of relative to our past levels of higher education and attainment in Colombia. However, when we compare ourselves to the international standards, we are still far behind the OECD, which we are part of since last month, I think. And in the graph on the left, the right, you can see that when this measured labor supply and demand by level of education, we can see that there is a gap between or a big difference between the supply of people with technology. We call that the vocational training in Colombia, technical and technological education, and that what is demand in the private sector in terms of those skills. So we start, even though we have increased enrollment and we have increased educational attainment as a result, we still have a huge human capital gap to close, and that's an area the country has to work on. And that higher level of enrollment translate also into an improvement in the composition of the labor market in terms of education. And as you can see, now, even though we're very close to the Latin American standard in terms of the distribution of the education or schooling, which is a proxy of skills, not a very good one, but it's one that is very popular among economists. So when we use schooling as a proxy of education, we see that we are pretty much close to the Latin American standard, but as I said before, far behind the OECD, since while in the OECD, people or labor force with secondary education or less is only 90%. In Colombia, this proportion is equal to 44%. This implies that firms are not happy with what they can find in the labor market in terms of skills. And that is shown in the results of the talent shortage survey that is conducted by Manpower annually. And since Colombia started to be measured by the survey, we have consistently found that there is a high skill gap and mismatch between what the firms in Colombia need and what the labor market can supply. And in the last measure that was conducted, the last survey that was conducted in 2019, we observed that 54% of the firms reported difficulties to fill their vacancies or jobs due to the lack of skills and experience of the applicants. An important finding of the survey, which was very surprising for me, that was the skills that were reported to be harder to find were in engineering or IT, where instead they were skilled trades such as electricians, welders, mechanics, sales, marketing, and manufacturing, which is consistent with the evidence I shown before related to the gap between the supply and demand of those levels of education. But it's surprising in terms of how this is a reflection of our productive structure and how far behind we are in terms of having a more complex productive structure. Management skills matter and are very important and highly related to innovation and the ability for a firm to export. So we have a key evidence that comes from the skills management survey from the World Bank. And while in Colombia, firms are reported to have very good and high quality management skills to improve the practices within the firms. When this is measured objectively by the metrics they use to measure this management quality, our performance is way below the Latin American average. Also, as I said before, this is very important, and there is a need for Colombia to improve on average their management skills and quality, because there is a very important correlation, that those firms that are considered having very quality management skills are more likely to innovate and export. And a little bit of what we think is going to be the more important and more salient impacts of the pandemic on what the firm considers important in terms of human capital accumulation is first, there's going to be, and there's a understanding that because of the school closures around the world, the interruption of the learning process is going to be translated in worse performance of education outcomes, such as quality and the ability to acquire certain skills that are necessary to have a good performance in life, especially in developing countries. So the World Bank expects to have a decline in learning, an increase in dropouts, and that's very worrisome, because it also will have a long-term impact on development and productivity and the ability to people to generate income. However, the other side of the story is how the lockdown that has been imposed around the world to contain the pandemic has meant that many firms have to adapt and accelerate the process of adoption of technology to be able to adapt their production processes to this virtual new normality, in which telework is the main source of firms to be able to keep operating. So after this, let's call it brief introduction of what is going on in Colombia in terms of human capital accumulation, and having said that, both efforts in terms of improving the context in which firms operate and improving the internal efforts of firms to be more productive, there are certain recommendations that we provide to both public sector and private sector to improve this outlook. So for the public sector, for example, there is a need to increase efforts to increase quality of education, promote dual education and high quality virtual higher education as a result of what is going on with the pandemic, incorporate knowledge and technology through technological extension policy that are very popular right now. That is programs that are targeting small firms to help them get through or help them improve their managerial skills with the goal of improving productivity outcomes. And in terms of what the private sector can do, it is important for it to optimize the use of the human resources, to invest in human capital training, to adopt better management practices, focus on skills rather than degrees. That's very important and relevant in the context of Colombia, and very important because of the evidence I showed before. Improve recruitment policies to reduce biases and attract and retain the most talented. And with that, I think I have said it all, so there's no need for me to go through the main takeaways. Only saying that the COVID has changed the outlook in many areas of the economy, not only education and human capital accumulation. So firms and governments have to adapt in response. So thank you very much for this invitation again, and I hope what I showed before is of use for the attendees of the panel. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Joanna, for your intervention and for your presentation. Our next panelist is Jose Rojas Mendez. He is a professor of international business and marketing at Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, Canada. He received his PhD in marketing from Manchester Business School, England, and his MBA from University of Ottawa, Canada. His research interests include nation branding, international customer behavior, cross-cultural issues in business, and international marketing. He has published more than 50 academic papers, and his work has previously appeared in journals like Tourism and Management, the Journal of Business Research, and plenty more. In 2019, Dr. Rojas Mendez has received the Best Paper Award from Journal of Product and Brand Management, and in 2017 he was distinguished with the Research Achievement Award granted by Carleton University to 10 of the most outstanding researchers of the institution. Dr. Rojas Mendez has worked as a consultant for companies operating in a wide variety of industries in various countries, including pension systems, supermarkets, funds, constructions, and education. As part of his career, he has carried out research on issues related to national and foreign brands, multiculturality in business, marketing, and international consumer behavior. Dr. Rojas Mendez has been a visiting professor and has been invited to give lectures in international business and marketing in more than 30 countries. Welcome, Dr. Rojas Mendez.
Thank you so much for having me in this opportunity, and thank you so much to Unipanamericana for the invitation to contribute with some ideas about how the educational system can contribute to the productive sector. I like to share with everybody now my presentation. So the title that I have given to my presentation is How High Educational System Boosts Economic Growth. And I will be particularly talking about the Canadian model. So a little bit of history before and looking backward. I would like to say that if we go back to the 1900s at the beginning, universities were available for a very minor fraction of the population that was estimated at 1%, which was very, very low. 100 years later, that figure went up to 20%, and nowadays probably is a lot more. So particularly in developing countries, many people like to go to university for an aspirational action that can help them to move upward in the social status that they might have in their particular countries. So the expansion of the offer of higher education is not just the product of growing wealth. It also has been very important for to contribute to the economic growth around the world. And it is estimated that the impact of higher education on GDP is quite significant. For example, if we take the case of a region, for example, one department in the case of Colombia, any time that that region double the number of universities available for people, the GDP is increasing per capita at around 4%, which is very significant. And also that will contribute to the increase of the GDP nationally wide. So it's quite interesting, the contribution, and quite important. However, somebody might say that probably just by double the number of universities automatically will increase the GDP. That's not the way. It has been proven that the right direction is that universities are working jointly with the economy in order to create more opportunities, and that will end at the end in an increase in the GDP. If you look at this graph that I have on the left, this illustrates the growing number of universities in the world. So for many centuries, we had a very flat line with no slope at all, almost. But as you can see when we approach the year 2000, after the 1900s, the number has increased significantly to the point that it is estimated that nowadays we have more than 15,000 universities in the world, plus other institutions that play a role also in the higher educational system. So since I want to talk about Canada, I would like to explain how this system works in the Canadian land. In the left, you can see the map of Canada, very colorful here, and I like you to concentrate at the bottom of the map, because at the bottom of the map you will see all the provinces, and in the upper part you will see or identify 3 different territories. So the educational system in Canada is very similar to the one that we can find in the US, but it also has some influences from the British system. So somehow it's quite similar to any Commonwealth country, particularly looking at Australia, for example, would be very similar in Canada. What do we find in Canada is that each province and territory, so we have 10 provinces and 3 territories, is responsible for education at levels that include universities and colleges. So this is not a matter that is run at the federal level, it's at the provincial level. So what does it mean in practice? Well, in practice, it shows us that each province and territory regulate the standards of education. So they are responsible for quality and also for the coverage of the educational system. So they are very strict in terms of requiring quality, mainly because they will assign budgets based on that assessment. So universities are very much obliged to comply with all the regulations that are imposed. However, even with these regulations, we should expect every province then has universities and colleges available for students. Most of the provinces have very similar type of educational system, with the exception of the province of Quebec, which has more influence from the French system rather than the British. So let's talk a little bit about universities and colleges in Canada, because these are the ones that conform the educational system at the higher educational level. we have colleges in Canada that are very similar to community college that we find in the US. In Canada, there are more than 150 colleges, and those have a capacity to provide education for almost 1 million full-time students and also another 1.5 million part-time learners in some 900 campuses available across the country. These colleges are technical schools where students can get a certificate or a diploma or an associate degree that will help them to work after. And programs that are offered by the colleges are not very long. Usually they fluctuate between 1 and 3 years. So it's a wide variety of offers. So what is the difference between colleges and universities, even though both are considered higher education? Well, the universities is a different system from colleges. In Canada, we have 96 public universities, which offer altogether around 15,000 different study programs. Universities are offering usually undergrad programs and postgraduate programs. And this will be surprising for the people that are connected in Colombia to see the cost that education is having in Canada, because the average cost for an undergrad degree, for example, if you study business and you want what in Colombia is called licenciatura, the total cost for 4 years will average 18,500 American dollars. So I'm not talking about it per year. I'm talking about the 4 years of tuition education. So this is somehow subsidized by the province. So every provincial government is putting money into the universities to complement what the amount of tuition fee paid directly by students. Programs at the university last 4 years at the undergrad level, and they last between 1 year and 3, 4, 5 years in the graduate level, because we have some master programs that last 1 year in an accelerated form, or we can go to the PhD programs, where doctoral programs where the students can take 4 years or 5 years as well. So let's talk a little bit about the type of programs that universities offer to the students in Canada. Well, they offer degree programs, which are dealing with different kind of programs at the bachelor degree level. These are 4-year programs. Also, we offer co-op programs. And what is interesting here, and thinking about the link between universities and the contribution of universities to the productive sector, is that these co-op programs allow the students periods of employment in related industries within the academic year as part of their curriculum. So in other words, students may have some training in the real world besides taking classes at the university. And what is interesting for the students is that most of the time these co-op programs are paid. So they receive money from the companies for going and taking those positions available in the market. Also, we offer certificate programs. Certificate programs require the completion of 2 semesters or 1 year of study, and usually they are very specific. For example, we offer certificate program in project management, or in specific things such as finance or human resources, that would allow those professionals to get a certification in front of the province or the federal government to really practice in that field. And finally, universities also offer collaborative or joint degree programs, which is a kind of association between universities and colleges. And they offer specific programs with a high intensity in practice, but also theoretical. for the students that might be interested. Some examples in the field are particularly joint programs that are offered in the engineering field. So what is the difference with colleges? Well, in colleges, they offer core programs. So they are very much focused on practical experience of the students. So these are very similar to the ones offered by the university. But some other differences are, for example, in the apprenticeship programs, because these will allow senior people or more mature students to get a diploma from the university, to get a certificate from the university while they are working under the supervision of an expert. So they can take the basic knowledge at the college, and then they can work as part of their training X number of hours, usually in the range of hundreds or thousands of hours, and the students can get a diploma from the college. The other one are certificate programs that also are offered by colleges, and they can join universities and offer collaborative programs as well. Particularly my university has some collaborative programs with a college that is located in Ottawa, and we offer programs that last 3 years for the students in computer science and engineering. So why Canada has universities and colleges? Well, they serve different type of needs in the productive sector. Universities usually issue degrees professionally for people interested in working, sometimes in managerial positions or sometimes at specific fields. For example, nurses, doctors, lawyers, business people, and so on, engineers. But as it was mentioned before by Joanna in the previous presentation, many countries are realizing today that the big demand is not on university graduates, but in people managing trades, which are technical skills or technical diplomas that guarantee that they can perform a work in a very good manner. So Canada, for so many years, has been offering that possibility. However, this is very regulated by each province and territory. So colleges are offering the training and the education to this type of trades, but there is a kind of certification or license that must be used officially for those people to be able to work in the real market. And these certifications are exams provincially wide that can test if the students are ready or not to go and work independently. So these licenses and certifications are credentials that prove that its students have the competencies, skills, and knowledge to successfully perform all the tasks and duties that are supposed to do in their job. And these licenses are not issued by universities or colleges. These licenses are issued by local, provincial, and federal agencies. So this is a very good regulating system to control for the quality. So electricians, plumbers, technicals in air conditioning, and alike, mechanics, are people not going to university. They are going to colleges. They get a diploma, but before they can work in the real world, they have to get a license. If they don't get a license, they cannot work independently, and they are always being in need to work under the supervision of another person. But if you want to grow in the trade, then you have to have license. And sometimes for some trades, there are more than one license at different levels. So that is very interesting. So I like to conclude my presentation by telling you then how the educational system, the higher educational system, can contribute to the economy in different ways, because at the end of the day, we are interested in having people well equipped to work at different levels in industries. So in Canada, there is a good complement between universities and colleges to prepare all the students that are needed in the economy to support the growth of the economy and to keep the country in a good shape. So I try to summarize now the importance then of higher education. And higher education is not only universities, but also colleges or institutions in charge of preparing people with different trades. The first point that I'd like to highlight at this level is that the higher educational system in Canada created a quality workforce. So we have people well prepared to fulfill different roles in organizations or companies or the productive sector in order to contribute to the economy. The second point is that institutions at a higher level drive innovation. So there are very many patents and licenses that are developed at a university and college level that contribute also to improvement in the way that companies may be doing things. The third thing is that with this educational system, the whole country increased employability. So because there is no single country in the world that need only professionals from universities. There is a huge demand also for trades. And what is interesting here is that employability is guaranteed with equality. So if you go for a trade instead of a profession or a university degree, you still can earn enough money to live comfortable. So that's very good for people because they can choose exactly what they want to do, and they will be able to get enough money to live a decent life. Also, universities and colleges contribute to upskill existing workforces because there are different levels of training and education and practice that are required for preparing the workforce for the marketplace. The fifth point is that higher educational system here in Canada boosts graduate earning power. So the system is designed in a way that no matter which path you follow, you will be able to earn enough money and to have a future in practicing your career. So you can have a family, you can enjoy life, you can travel, and so on. And there are many instances where people with trades earn more money than people with university degrees. Also, and very important for the industry, all universities have extensive programs of collaboration with businesses. That's another point that is extremely important here. It's not only at the level of donations. For example, we have had in my school, we have had two former students who donate $10 million each one for the school. The first time was about 25 years ago, and the school, the faculty was able to launch a PhD program with that money. The second one was just a few years ago, about 3 years ago, and the money is being used for our new building that is being built for the Faculty of Business that we have in the university. So, but collaboration also goes to the point that companies are putting money into the universities, into colleges to support joint research, which means that the research will be focused in solving real problems that companies are facing. And finally, universities and colleges are feeding into a knowledge-based economy that Canada is supporting at the moment. So as you can see, there are at least 7 ways that justify the existence of the higher educational system. But the most important thing is that because of this system, which is very diversified, we can cover different aspects that all together contribute to the welfare and well-being of the whole population in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jose Rojas Mendez, for your presentation. Just a reminder for all the participants in YouTube, if you have any questions, please write it on the chat and I'll read it to the panelists at the end. Our next and last panelist is Professor Anita Plenovchevich. I hope that's correct. She is a full professor in management in education at the University of Primorska, Slovenia. Associate Professor for Research Methodology. Anita has participated in quite some European projects and was also part of the LAURDS group. She was Dean of the Faculty of Administration of the University of Primorska from 2010 to 2014. Welcome, Professor Anita.
Thank you very much. Let me first say thank you to Unipanamericana, thanks to Professor Felipe Valencia Quintero. Thank you very much. It's always my pleasure to be with Colombians, almost like virtually in Colombia. So let me share my today's presentation, which is about, just give me a second here. Okay, about human talent training for companies. So this is very broad area, and it's always challenging how to make it narrow. For today's presentation, I picked up one specific part, which is called internship. Also, in some translations, you find the word work placement, usually not paid, but required in the program. So let me first say where I'm coming from, because that plays a role in understanding the concept of internship, and of course the background influences also the content. So when you talk about Europe, you have a feeling that this is in a way unified space, you know. Yes, we do have the Bologna system, which was a structural closeness of all European countries. But on the other hand, it also leaves national higher education systems under national jurisdictions. So Slovenia is a small country with population of 2 million and approximately 20,000 square kilometers, bordering Austria, Croatia, Hungary, and Italy. So this is, let's say, important because we are a EU member and also EU Monetary Union member, but we have a system that is in a way very interesting. Let me first say some facts about my university. So it is situated in Koper, which is really an ancient Mediterranean town, at the crossroad between Central and Southern Europe. We have approximately 5,000 undergraduate and postgraduate students, 7 faculties, 2 research institutes, and 2 adjunct institutions. So overall, we talk about 650 employees. This is the size of the university. When you talk about my faculty, so we have 7 faculties at the university, and Faculty of Management is one of them. So in 2003, we became the founding member of the University of Primorska. We have approximately 720 students and 55 academic staff and 16 professional workers. So we are accredited for 3 research areas. for economics, administrative and organizational studies, and law. So, all this is somehow in tune with the European space. Now, what is different is the higher education system in Slovenia. I will try to share. Okay. Kelly, do you see this scheme?
We are looking at your presentation, at your slide.
Okay, is it structure of the education system? No.
It says higher education system in Slovenia.
Okay, so I will then for a second get off this presentation, okay? And I will show you the structure because it is in a way similar as it is to in Canada when you talk about co-ops. So when you look at, let me just get back, sorry for this. Okay, so I will stop sharing this and I will go back to a different one. So, oh, okay, I think that will not work, so I will omit it. Let me just say that we have a system that works, that has two streams, okay? We have the stream that is so-called professional, and it is the academic stream. And all other countries, many other countries in Europe, have established so-called polytechnics or universities of applied sciences. But in Slovenia, we have universities, we have faculties, and within faculties, we have these two streams, academic program and professional program. So, this makes a huge difference because if you want to proceed, you can go from academic program to a master study or directly to doctoral program. If you are in professional program, you have to go to master study, and I mean you have to if you want to, but you cannot proceed directly to doctoral studies. Now, if you look at the number of students in Slovenia in the first and the second Bologna cycle, so undergraduate, bachelor students and master students, you can see that we had in the last academic year, we had almost 42,000 students in the first cycle and almost 21,000 students in the second cycle. And we had in professional higher education, so the first Bologna cycle, what we are registered for, business administration and law, 2,700 and something students. And in academic, first Bologna cycle, 2,000 and approximately 200 students. So you can see how many students enroll in these programs, and that basically it's the same interest for professional and for academic programs because there is no major difference except in one area. And this is that in professional programs, internship is required, it's a demand. And in academic programs, internship is a sort of elective course, so students can take it or not. Now, internship is perceived as something that actually bridges the gap between companies and universities. And in my country, you can often hear companies saying, oh yes, we get guys with diploma degree, but unfortunately they are not ready to work. So it seems like the competencies are not the right ones, whatever we call that. But then on the other hand, you talk to academics, you talk to universities, and when we look at the competencies, they are comparable with all competencies around Europe. So what is it that makes the difference in satisfaction, in expectations of companies when they receive new employees straightforwardly from the university? So we all focus on this internship because it is seen as one of the possibilities to bridge these differences between the two worlds, to bring them closer and to reduce the tensions that have been existing for a long time, and it's a big question. So somebody comes from the Faculty of Management or Faculty of Economics, and the company expects this person to do the balance sheet immediately, straightforwardly, no mistakes, and so on. This was just an example. So we joined the project that has been going on in Slovenia. It's an international project, and the lead partner is University of Ljubljana. It is called InShip project. So partners are from Germany, from Czech Republic, and from Spain. And so one of the questions, of course, is what kind of internship could we need to develop in order to meet better the requirements, expectations, demands from the working places, future jobs. And InShip project itself is focused on faculties of education. However, Faculty of Management joined as a sort of a mirror how things work in this field. Now, we conducted quite an extensive research at our faculty. What could be changed? What is going on? How different partners in this internship perceive internship itself, and what they see as strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So, in their view, in the view of these mentors who come from the company, so the receiving institution, in the views of students who go there and don't want to cook coffee only in the office and clean the office. They want to participate in all activities that company provides. And of course, how the faculty sees what is going on in the field of internship. Now, aims that are to be achieved with internship are defined in the workplace placement regulations, which actually stipulate how this internship should be organized, what are the duties and tasks from the companies, and what students are required to do. And some of these things, so here you see colored green, is the focus on students. So creating job opportunities for the students and developing student focus for future employment. So it is a sort of a push for students to think what to do. Now, in blue color is what basically companies are supposed to do, are expected to do. So it is supposed to create a business network together with, of course, the Faculty of management, establishing cooperation with economic and non-economic organizations, so with public institutions. And one of the purposes of this work placement is also to evaluate students' competencies. So, together with the mentor at the faculty, mentor in the company, and with other participants, also students' self-evaluation, a sort of final evaluation is to be presented. What are the strengths of students, what competencies need to be improved, and where is still a lot of space for improvement. So we gathered data. I have to say that this coronavirus interrupted part of this research because we conducted, for example, semi-structured interviews this spring, but the response was very low because students did not complete their internship. So the second year students of this generation did not complete the internship yet. So we only got like partial responses, but as you can see, there was self-evaluation report for the past year, so 2018-19. We sent out questionnaire for students, questionnaire for mentors in the companies, and this year also a questionnaire in a form of SWOT analysis in order to collect the data. We talk about approximately 80 students that participated in this analysis. And what are the main findings actually correspond very interesting with what the first speaker today, Professor Joseph Duarte, talked about. So what are the competencies that students emphasize, that companies emphasize, and also mentors from the university emphasize. So it is, we can see two perspectives in our findings. One is very critical, I would also say in a way negative. So it is the perception that internship is exploitation because this is unpaid work, and students also do some work that is not related to their studies, not to their future profession, has nothing to do with the competencies they are supposed to develop during the studies and during this internship. And the other one is much more positive perspective, which comes from students mostly, that students learn a lot. They have a feeling that they had gained an insight into deep processes of companies, which can never be taught at the university. We also got very high average from mentors in terms of the assessment of each student. And there were only 2 mentors among 60 students that evaluated, so 2 students lower than the average 3 on different items which represent competencies that they were supposed to assess. And that says a lot, so they were pleased with students, but when we put all this, so the critical perspective and the positive perspective together, one of the important findings is that internship is too short. So this raises the question, what kind of placement, how long should it last? Do we come closer to what Professor Rojas Mendes talked about co-op programs, okay? So, which are in Slovenia very much related to undergraduate studies and certification of specific skills. So, not only what is the length of internship, but what are the skills, I apologize, that students and competencies that students need to have in order to contribute well. Okay, this is not coronavirus. To participate in what is called to be good members of society of 4.0 and to be able to work for the industry 5.0. So to stay within the framework of time, it is what we can say to stay what is a happy experience, a metaphor for the internship that students use a lot. So you go somewhere, you see something, but you go back and you forget about this. Or we can take it as a lesson learned. Okay, what have we all learned from this internship in the past years? But most of all, we have to look beyond current status and look how internship can be developed so to bring students closer to 4.0 society and 5.0 industry. So thank you very much for your attention. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor. Okay, so a big thank you to all of our panelists for their great presentations. I would like to say that all the knowledge and experience you have shared with us today is for sure making a big difference of what we used to think about the relation between industry and university. We have some questions for you. We will begin with the questions from YouTube. There is a question from Santiago Daza to Dr. Joseph Duarte. He said, good morning. How do you get the data about what the society is going to need in the future? Or how do you define the goals of the companies in the future?
Okay, this is a very complicated question to answer because nobody knows what can happen in the future. Okay, but the things that we are doing as researchers is just to see what is happening now and trying to think about the possible trends according to the data that we have in these moments. Of course, anything that the things that we are thinking for the future now in this moment is not necessarily that really will happen in the future. But for instance, everything related to the digital competence or the uses, for instance, machine learnings in the case of education, etc. It's something that is happening now and it's growing. And as you can see during this pandemic period, for instance, it was growing also. No? That means, who knows, but we have data and we can see this data in order to interpret, in order to build some trends for the future.
Thank you, Dr. Duarte. I have a question for Joanna. What is the perception of the productive sector regarding the training of human talent? Does this training respond to the needs of the firms? You are mute, Joanna.
Sorry about that. So, well, as I showed in the presentation, there's a huge gap between what is needed in the private sector and the productive sector and what is being offered by the educational system in the country. So what we call that in Spanish pertinence. I don't know if that's a correct translation of what it is, but let's say like there is a skill mismatch between the level of skills and the quality of the skills and the type of skills that the students are getting in the educational system and what is required in the productive system. The country has tried to make efforts in closing such gaps by implementing, I think most of the panelists are familiar with this concept, the national qualifications framework, that it tries to translate all the knowledge, even regardless of the way you have acquired such knowledge, through the formal education system or through experiences in life, to translate that in qualifications that can be read by the productive sector, and that will allow both workers to have higher levels of mobility through the education system and through the labor market, but also for the private sector and the productive sector to reduce the asymmetry of information in terms of what are the skills that the population have and how they can use those skills to improve their performance as a firm. So I think that the implementation of that tool is very important for the country. Right now, we actually have it. We have a national qualification framework. There's been efforts in measure, actually, that's very relevant to the previous question. There's been efforts by the Ministry of Labor and the Ministry of Education to measure the gaps in different sectors of the economy, both in terms of what is currently demanded and what will be demanded in the future. That's called measuring of actually human capital gaps. And that is being translated in a certain classification of the skills that it requires in different sectors. What is pending is for the country to make more efforts, for the universities to adapt the national qualification frameworks to their offer of programs, so that will guarantee that there is a connection between that effort of measuring the demands of the private sector and that the universities are responding, or higher education institutions are responding to those demands and closing such gaps.
Okay, thank you. Professor Anita, is in Slovenia such a gap between industry and university? You are mute.
Thank you. Thank you. I would say there is sort of constant tension rather than saying it's a gap, okay? Because these expectations also shift, they are not always the same, which is normal. So it is kind of, try to balance, try to bridge, to bring these two spaces together. And I don't believe personally that this can ever happen, because this is like very dynamic. The industry, the production sector is very dynamic. So, and on the other hand, universities are to some extent rigid, okay? Which I don't think, and I don't label this as a negative, okay? They have, they change slowly. If you say they are like big tankers on the sea rather than small boats that shift every year, okay? And this stability also has some advantages. So these tensions are kind of, there, and we just try to balance them as good and in the best way possible. So that's why we have, let's say, these different organizations of employers, of different branches of industry and so on, that are in constant discussions when programs are accredited, when programs are developed. It is the board of trustees at the universities that actually represent, also this production sector and their needs. So there is a lot of activities going on, but at the end, when you come from the policy level into this micro level, that's where you can see that's where problems occur.
Thank you. That's a very interesting point of view. Dr. Rojas Mendez, I would like to ask you, at the end of your presentation, you talk about the quality of the workforce. How do you measure that quality?
Well, one way easy to measure, but very not good, is the quality measured by the same university, because usually we tend to believe that we are doing things rightly. Otherwise, we will change, right? So in Canada, the quality of education is assessed by the provincial government. So the same parameters are considered for every institution. So we really rely on external certifications or accreditations for our quality. So we are in the school at the university level, we are controlled not only by the provincial government, which is mandatory, but also we are controlled and examined by other organizations that we want to voluntarily be members of, and that compare us at the international level. For example, in the business school, we are accredited by AACSB, which is the most important accreditation organization in the world, and that only 5% of the business school or faculties of business are accredited altogether. So that gives us some indication about the quality. The other thing that gives us an indication about the quality of our students is the employability level. For example, in the two programs that we offer in our faculty, we have over 90% of employability within 1 year. So, which is very good. Excuse me. It's not COVID-19 either. So, so that's another thing, and we try to measure that frequently. The other level of measure that measures the quality is not only employability, but employability within the field of study. Because you can study anything, but if you are a driver for Uber, then that's not the good employability that we are looking for, right? And we are working also very hard in making the students happy while they are at the university. So in Canada, there are measures, external measures that compare the satisfaction level by students in different universities. And that indicates if the student had a good time or not. And we see when the student had a good time that somehow they like to come back to the university. For example, to study another program, a master's degree, PhD program, to hire the university for a consultancy project, to send their children in the future to study with us, to allow their companies for internship positions, or to make a donation or a contribution to the university. So all those things are important for us in order to be sure that we are doing providing a good service to our students.
Thank you. I have a question for all of you. At the current COVID-19 situation, do you think there are new skills required by the companies to the new graduates? Do you think the academy should focus on the local needs rather than the global needs? We can start with you, Professor Rojas.
Okay, I like to say that definitely there are new skills needed, not only for the students, but for the faculty as well. For example, personally, this is the first time in September that I will be teaching an online class. I really enjoy classes face-to-face, and the students too, but we cannot do it that way today. So particularly I'm thinking in Latin Americans. Latin Americans will suffer or are suffering a lot, because by using an online platform, we don't have the kind of interaction that the students like. For example, I remember when I go to Colombia to teach, many times I see the students hugging themselves, kissing themselves, touching, and all that kind of interaction is not possible online. Second, Latinos, by definition, we are not very self-disciplined. So we need an external force to make us to achieve the goal. But in this case, with an online delivery, students need to develop self-discipline, because it's up to you to follow the path of the class. So you are not forced to go at a specific time unless you are teaching synchronically. But many of the delivery nowadays is asynchronically. So it's up to you during the week when you watch the session and when you perform the activities and so on and so forth. So somehow the new skills demanded because of the COVID-19 are related to be self-sufficient, to ensure that you are learning properly and you are getting all the skills that you need to be successful.
I would like to add something to this question. Of course, I totally agree with the comments made by Professor Rojas. But to me, one of the most interesting things, particularly here in my country, was the way that the companies reacted to when the people was here self-isolated. That means the people was working at home. Many companies are not prepared to this situation, but also many companies use this situation to start thinking in a different way to work and to provide to their workers, their people, the possibility to start or continuous working at home. And I think this is also very interesting because this is better for people, and also it's sometimes better for companies because you can also control the productivity according to the final goals of the project. But by the way, at the end, the most difficult thing is maybe to change the mentality or the way to approach from the high level at the institutions in order to apply these new rules inside of the companies. But I'm sure, in particular here in Europe, this is a big change. Many companies are changing offering to the workers the possibility to work at home.
Yeah.
And of course, that to do that, the people need new competences that we told before, etc., etc. No? But this is a big change.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both Professor Rojas and Professor Duarte. The COVID-19 have a few positive things, and one of them is the fact that it's pushing the change and it's pushing companies and people to adopt technology in their lives, not only for the use of social media or social interactions, but also for productivity matters. And that's very important for the economy, for the evolution of technology, and how we're gonna keep thinking on how production works and how the process works. Also, I would like to add to what Professor Duarte said in terms of what is changing within companies in terms of how they understand delivery or achieving results. We're transitioning towards a mindset of productivity being the number of hours you spend at the office, and that means that you're a very good worker because you spend most of your time at the office. But that's especially true in Latin America. In Europe, is not that true. But towards that mindset in which delivery means that you achieve, achievement or progress or productivity means that you deliver results, and that gives a certain kind of flexibility that will help. It has its pros and cons, but it will help, for example, young people or women to be more involved or participate more in labor market because they can have more flexibility in managing their time. That's first. In Colombia, I was thinking that there is I think in most countries in Latin America, there is a misconception about virtual education and the quality of the programs that you can, the quality that you can get from virtual education, if it's going to be the same as being or having face-to-face interaction with the people you are learning from. And that's an area in which we have to work a lot. For example, in Colombia, only 12% of those enrolled in higher education are enrolled in virtual programs, and only 3% of the programs that are offered virtually are certified by the government. We have a system of certification of high-quality programs are certified by the government of being high-quality programs. So we have a huge, let's say, opportunity of improvement for the adoption of virtual education, which is crucial in terms of your question because of in terms of how competences are changing, or the manual competences are changing in a rapid pace because of the COVID-19, and it's because precisely that shift that we as society were forced to do in terms of technology adaptation, which is it has to face in developing countries the challenge of also guaranteeing access to technology, guaranteeing access to internet, access to computers, access to devices that allow you to be connected to your workplace and to the world.
Thank you. Professor Anita, would you?
Thank you. Of course, I agree with what my colleagues have said, but I would also raise a perhaps more critical view on this COVID and post-COVID period. Of course, we can see all the benefits that work from home via internet, via technology actually brings. But it is also, let's say, a bit darker side. So technology has a great not technology itself. Behind technology are always people, okay? So there is also an opportunity to have bigger control over employees, over citizens. So this is one issue that we actually discuss in my country right now, also by using the COVID alarm system or the application that says who has been affected, not personally, but the signal, hey, watch out, you are having coffee with somebody who is infected. So you have more control, and people who worked from home during this COVID closure, actually, this is not now statistically measured, okay, because this is not, it is yet to come. It is just an observation that people reported like longer working hours and more, to say, intense work, and if I say this for the academia, for the university, I have to say we have a kind of rule, 24 hours for email response, but this has changed, shortened. If you didn't respond in a couple of hours, you already received an email from a student. Hello, I sent you an email. You haven't responded yet. Okay, you know what I mean? It's also this, let's say, the other side that brings, yes, the opportunity to work from home, but also control and different pressures, and perhaps we'll have to think consequently also about different competencies, more, let's say, not only communication, teamwork, motivation, and so on, but something that would be like self-regulation or I don't know what to put to the second part, but definitely something like building yourself, to be able to work in this different changed environment.
Okay, thank you, Professor Anita. Professor Rojas, you have something to add? We have 10 more minutes, so I would like to give you the space to add what you need to add. And if we have another question or our last question, that would be great.
Sure. There is one other point that related to your question I have been thinking of. And the question is the following, and I don't have an answer for it. The question is, will the market continue paying the high prices of education if we change to online teaching completely? Because, for example, as far as I know, in Colombia, there are universities that charge per term, for academic term, like over 10 million pesos. So let's say $4,000 per semester and more. But you are paying that for so many things. It's not only the education, also with the people that you are connecting, for the environment, for some facilities at the university, library access, a place to gather with my friends, accommodation, things like that. So what will happen with the price strategy by higher education institutions if we change completely to an online environment now? So that will be a huge change, because there are so many universities that will not be able to resist dropping the prices, or that will expose the situation that in many countries higher education is more expensive than the levels it should be. For example, as I mentioned before, on average, the whole program of 4 years in Canada is less than 20,000 American dollars for a Canadian person or for a permanent resident. So with that amount of money, I will have enough to study 2 years in Columbia program only. So where I'm going to get the money to study the other, and then we see the role of the government or the state. The state is the one that is in charge or responsible to provide for education. But at the end, the problem will be price. So somehow the COVID-19 will shake the system in a way that most of the traditional strategies will need to be changed.
Yes. Can I?
Yeah.
Yes. Very, very interesting, your approach, Professor. Of course, this approach from Canada or the States are very different than the things that happens here in Europe. For instance, here, as you know, education is public. Many universities are offering in very few fees for education. But I can understand your approach, and I agree with some of the things that you are saying. But I don't agree that at the end, the traditional universities will pass totally to online modalities, because this is a situation that will happen now as a result of the COVID-19. But some universities, for instance, here, Oxford and Cambridge, are saying, okay, some parts, or the physical parts, laboratories, these kind of things will remain physically, but the rest of the things can pass during this period in an online modality. Of course, the students will pay the same, but as you know, the prices here or the fees here are cheaper than the fees, no? But at the end, the price is something, this is not my field, but I'm sure it's something related to the quality. And of course, the quality is not on the modality that we are providing the education. At the end, the quality is measured by the results of this education. It doesn't matter if this education happens face-to-face or happens in a situation in a virtual environment or in a hybrid environment that mixed both of them. At the end, for instance, you mentioned before during your presentation, your university is evaluated by the external association, companies, etc. It's the same in our case. And at the end, the most valuable evaluation is the labor market. And for instance, our studies, and we have 25 years old university providing totally online formation, training and education. And the labor market are saying, okay, your graduates have the same level than the other graduates in the other universities. And you can prove this on the results. I think it is important to take into account this. I hope when we have a vaccine for this COVID-19, everything will remain the same than the beginning. But I hope that many things change. For instance, people realize that something can happen and maybe virtual education have also a good quality, and this is very important for Latin American countries where the reputation of virtual education is so bad. But I'm sure that something good will remain at the end of this pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Duarte. We have just 4 minutes left because we have to start the other panel. I know Dr. Rojas has something to add, but I don't know if we can do it in a short term.
Well, just to say to what Professor Duarte mentioned, that I am assuming for my whole argument that COVID-19 is going to last for a while, and eventually maybe we are going to have COVID-20 or COVID-21. And so what will happen in that case? That will change dramatically the whole scenario that we are planning, because we hope that the COVID-19 will be over in a few months. But we don't know, and we don't know if the new pandemic will be around the corner or not. So that will be a big change. But totally agree that the actual quality is measured at the end, right? By good point.
Okay, I would like to thank you for accepting our invitation to all of you. It's been great. It's been a great couple of hours. I hope all the participants have enjoyed too, and as much as I did. And thank you all for sharing this time with us. Hope to see you in our next panel that starts at 10. So thank you, a big thank you to all of you panelists.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
For the
Thank
invitation.
you.
It's a pleasure. Very nice meeting you all. I hope we can keep in touch.
I sent an invitation to the panelists by LinkedIn. So you will receive my invitation, so please accept it and we can keep in touch.
Okay.
Great.
Sure.
That's great.
Thank you.
It was a
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.